Hey everyone, this podcast was recorded before the deals for the WGA and SAG-AFTRA guilds were made. But with the upcoming possible SAG-AFTRA Video Game Edition strike, make sure to show your support for those who are still on strike or are going on strike. The industries that we work in would be nothing without those who do all the heavy lifting. We at Renegade Animation and Renegade Pop Culture stand by the guilds and unions of the entertainment industry and any industry that is on strike right now. With all that said, if you like what we do, please give us a like, a follow, and a rating on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to us. We are everywhere. Also, support our Patreon. That way we can keep doing what we love, and that's talking about animation. And now, on with the show.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Renegade Animation on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your host for this evening. Joining me, as always, is the animation guru himself, Cameron.
Howdy, howdy.
And today we have a pretty interesting episode. We've got reviews for Pom Poko. That's Isao Takahata's film from 1994. And The Inventor, a new stop-motion 2D animated film that just came out this year. So we will begin with a movie that I honestly went in with lowered expectations than it turned out to actually deserve. Let's talk about Pom Poko.
This came out after the success of My Neighbor Totoro. And bearing in mind the discussion and fandom around Ghibli was wildly different from the late 2000s to the early 2010s. So this is before we realized that Goro was going to give us Earwig and the Witch, and then Miyazaki was going to come out of retirement again for The Boy and the Heron. Now, again, at that time, apparently from the Ghibli fandom and community, there were 3 or so films that were considered the lowest tier of Ghibli. Those were Howl's Moving Castle from Hayao Miyazaki, Isao Takahata's Pom Poko, and what we'll be talking about next time, Tales from Earthsea from Goro Miyazaki. And on like a base level, I get it. Pom Poko probably has one of the most distinct tones and atmospheres around the Ghibli filmography. And because it's about a group of tanuki or raccoon dogs that are trying to find a way to either stop the humans from taking away their forests to keep building housing and businesses, or trying to find some kind of compromise to live among them, with them, and to make sure both sides can live peacefully. The original, I would assume, tone of Pom Poko was, it's probably one of the longer Ghibli films, at capping off at around 2 hours. And there wasn't really a main character per se that we follow. It was more of an ensemble period piece drama, or a period piece in terms of how the Pom Poko timeline is told via a narration by the amazing Maurice Lamar.
Yeah, his narration in this is kind of amazing. Almost like he's going for those nature documentaries with his diction.
Yeah, and another thing to point out is, outside of one celebrity that they got, Pom Poko is quite possibly, until we hear from The Boy and the Heron, the one Ghibli film to mostly be voice casted with voice actors and character actors. So outside of Jonathan Taylor Thomas as Shokiji, everyone else is either voiced by like Clancy Brown, Kevin Michael Richardson, J.K. Simmons, Trace McNeil, John DiMaggio, Andre Stolka, Brian Posey, Brian George, Olivia Diabo, Wally Kurth, Jess Hartnell, David Oliver Cohen, Gillian Bowen, and if you listen carefully to Otama, she was voiced by the late great Russie Taylor, or as you would know her as the voice of Minnie Mouse, among many other characters. I think that definitely gives a very distinct vibe to the film. There's no actors who are getting into the booth for the first time saying like, wow, I never voice acted before, or anything like that. There's definitely like a mindset that you have to shift towards to really get into Pom Poko, and that's no one is the main character. We just follow a bunch of different characters as they try to handle the human situation.
This is what, my third or fourth Takahata film, and I think by now I've sort of figured out what makes him different from Miyazaki. And while I think this might be I still say this is his weakest film, it's still unique once you actually get onto its wavelength. And I kind of like the fact that this plays kind of fast and loose with a traditional story structure. Instead of following one kind of generic main protagonist, we get like a bunch of interesting characters.
It's a very morally gray story because there are moments where you are wanting to root for and support the Tanuki, but there are moments where they become fairly unlikable, especially when the first part of their plan ends up with a few humans getting killed. Like the elders try to say like, hey, let's keep down the laughing and victory to a minimum because we got these humans killed accidentally. And the way that the Tanuki start to laugh, it paints an odd picture of how you're supposed to feel. And I think back then, even to now, because we have to have this conversation about how we can follow and invest in like flawed characters.
Yeah.
So it becomes more a journey of the Tanuki realizing that going to war with one another was kind of pointless because as they fight, the humans kept making more and more housing and buildings and what have you. And I assume when this film was made, while it is intensely pro-environment, it must have taken place during a time period where a big topic was like the housing market and economy. Because the humans were like, well, yeah, the spirits are kind of scary and weird. I would love to move and get out of their homeland, but I can't afford to live anywhere else. While we don't get too much focus on the humans, we do see like small glimpses of like how some, like the Wonderland president, who's voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, are willing to take advantage of the Tanuki's shenanigans for his own pockets. Of like, oh yeah, the big demon parade was a part of my upcoming Wonderland attraction.
Watching that sequence while the writers and actors strike continues, it kind of makes that a little bit prescient. We're seeing now how studios sort of treat their talent, and this just kind of reminded me of that a little bit.
And during the whole runtime, as we follow the Tanuki, a lot of them do want to find a peaceful alternative way to live with the humans or for the humans to stop doing what they're doing. And some are willing to kill or, in the sake of Gonta, are willing to die on the line to make sure that the humans stop tearing down their forests. Even Seizaimon, who's voiced by J.K. Simmons, ends up at the end of the movie saying like, hey, I got some great land that you can use and we can chop down a few trees, no problem. So this movie is more of a character study than Takahata. The one thing that makes him distinct from Miyazaki is that he's willing to be more experimental with his stories, his visuals, and the kind of characters that we follow. Because it could have easily been an easy thing to do with making Shokiji the one to journey to meet the humans and find out that humans aren't all that bad, but also finds a way to stop the human progress from taking over the forests that they all live in. And the movie ends basically on a positive note. It's more of a compromise where, like, instead of like a Miyazaki or like a US animated film where it would just be like all okay by the end of it, when it's really not. And I feel like that threw off a lot of Ghibli fans. Not to say that there aren't moments where the tone is a bit clunky in its execution. Sometimes you'll go from goofy shenanigans to watching the Tanuki get run over in a fairly realistic manner. Like, there's a lot of death. And I know we just got off of Princess Mononoke, where heads were flying off, limbs were getting sliced off, or people were getting pretty much shot and exploded. But there's something that hits differently with watching, for the most part, a lot of Tanuki die.
And the fact that these Tanuki are, when they're not in their transformed state, they are drawn pretty realistically, which makes their death scenes hit just that much harder.
It's a weird thing to accept when you finally start to watch it. And yeah, sometimes the pacing could be a little slow. And we see some characters show up once and then never again. Like Hayashi, who's voiced by Brian Posehn. He shows up to kind of talk about, hey, why is your dirt getting into our drinking water? And then you don't see him again. Or I did not see or notice his human disguise.
I think he only pops up for like that one scene, and then he might be like in the crowd somewhere, but after that, it's really just that one scene where he has like the most screen time.
And there are some, I would argue, like observations about how the old generation and the new generation handle these topics of how do we deal with the humans. Because we get to, the iconic demon parade moment that was mostly hosted by Gyobu, voiced by Jess Harnell. And they do this big parade of all these yokai and demons and such. And if you look closely, you'll see Kiki from Kiki's Delivery Service, Porco Rosso's Plane, and My Neighbor Totoro in the background, or during these big parade moments. But Gyobu passes away from basically his body's using the Tanuki magic was causing too much strain on him. And once again, from all these little shenanigans that we watch with the demon parade, it takes a moment for you to realize when the Buddha comes down to take Gyobu's spirited away. It's like, did Gyobu just die?
I think that's kind of a perfect example of the clunkiness of the tone, because while I agree that Operation Spectre is probably, for me at least, the biggest highlight of the film, to go from all of that to Gyobu's death is a bit jarring.
And then with Hage, voiced by Brian George, the last Tanuki that has lived from the era of the samurai, it was more sad than anything else, because the way that they handle that, where it was just like, this guy is off in the deep end mentally. He's not really all there, and they decide to send him off with a bunch of the Tanuki who don't know how to transform. Then that's when we jump cut to the current day, or the current day of that time period, where the Tanuki have found a compromise of living among the humans, but also the humans making sure there's enough forest and park areas for the Tanuki to live in. And some Tanuki don't even want to live among the humans. They just live as wild animals. And that's why this movie's more interesting to talk about, because, again, we don't really follow a main character. They try to make Shokichi a pseudo main character for the audience, but he's very bland. And I'm not saying that because of Jonathan Taylor Thomas's performance. Like, whether you choose the dub or the sub, where he's originally voiced by Makoto Nonomura, he's just a bland character.
He is. That's really nobody's fault but how the character is written. But I think that's why I prefer to enjoy this more as an ensemble piece, because there are so many other characters who are just more interesting to follow.
I mean, like, we have the headstrong Gunta, we have Sazaimon's conflict of interest, we have Oroku, voiced by the great Tress MacNeille, who is probably the most reasonable of the bunch, along with Osho, voiced by Andrei Stotka. And I will say, I love that scene when Osho walked out of the bathroom during the big Operation Spectre thing. And he just walked out of the bathroom, probably just to go to the bathroom, and a human freaks out. And, like, this movie can be very funny and very cute. Like, watching it's like spring and all the Tanuki just want to do is get together and make babies. Or like when Gonta's just like, no, we got to wipe out all the humans. But then everyone's just like, but what about tempura or pizza or donuts?
That's one of my favorite running gags. Every time Gunta tries to like rally the troops, they always, without fail, get distracted by food.
Then we have aspects of the story where, like, Ryutaro, voiced by John DiMaggio, is having a discussion with Kincho, one of the elder Tanuki, about, like, hey, listen, our forests are gone, our temples will be destroyed, but to make it in this world, you have to make money. And that's how some of them do survive in the end. Like I said, it's not my favorite Ghibli movie, and I don't even think I would consider it one of the weaker ones. It's just very different, because I do like a lot of the characters. I think the conflict is really interesting. At least, even if you're not a big fan of this movie, it leaves you a lot to think about, which the worst thing a show, a movie, a game, or an experience in the world of art can do is leave you with no impression whatsoever.
Exactly. And the only reason I say that this is Takahata's weakest film is because something has to be, like, just statistically. But even then, there's still a lot of substance to this movie beyond the surface. Like, this movie has a lot to say about deforestation, like the housing movement, and like gentrification, all of that just happens to involve a group of like magical transforming raccoons.
Exactly. Like, again, Takahata's big appeal as a Ghibli director, or a director at Ghibli, is the fact that he was willing to go a different path with his animated films. And I know a lot of people only quote unquote know about this movie because of the whole pouch situation. I think there was a misunderstanding of what they actually are. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, they're using their testicles. And it's like, no, that's actually like a pouch. So But I know Disney at the time, which I'm kind of amazed that they got this movie when they were originally bringing over the Ghibli films. Like, we couldn't get Ocean Waves in only yesterday, but they could get the animated film of animals that just so happen to use these pouches that are right next to the testicles for their transformation magic and such. Because, Disney at that time, I don't know, it feels like a very for kids acquiring One Piece situation, if that makes sense. Because it's like they saw the cute animals, like the Tanukis, and it's like, oh, this is Ghibli, and it's going to be cute and whimsical. And then here's a bunch of animal deaths and pouches that get used for magic that just so happen to be where the testicles are. So you can tell that the dub had to word it in a way that wouldn't cause parents to be like, I can't believe Disney, of all people, made this film come over to the US or something like that.
I will say this, to Disney's credit. Obviously, we told the story last time about, I think it was Suzuki who sent the katana to Harvey Weinstein that said no cuts when they were working on Princess Mononoke, but it's only in the English dub where they make like audio changes to the story, but they do a pretty good job of like leaving like the actual animation uncensored.
There's nothing really that needed to be censored. It's just a interesting part of Tanuki folklore. They even make fun of the fact that the Tanuki, if they use the leaves, which is usually what is a part of their iconography, it's just for amateurs, which I love that little moment when Oroku talks about that. And they're like, don't you need a leaf to do that? Please, only amateurs use that.
It's like their training wheels for transforming.
No, it's a very compelling and complicated movie in a lot of ways. And I can see why it was like the big award winner when it was released in Japan back in 1990.
The 94-95 season.
And it's a shame that we couldn't quite get this one until 2005. But I'm glad that the mindset seems to be changing a lot, because when I watched this recently, I had a mostly negative experience from it because, like, for the 3 times I watched it, I was really unsure how to feel about it. I felt like its tone was all over the place. The Tanuki weren't all that likable. But then after rewatching it last night, it was a very different experience because a lot of us need to get rid of all that internet content creator, influencer baggage that we all picked up after a little bit and just realize, hey, wait a minute, let me actually watch it and get my own thoughts and observations about it instead of remembering what some nobody content creator said about it.
I'm glad I went into this with lowered expectations, mostly because of all that 2010s internet nonsense clouding my judgment, but actually taking the time to engage with the material, understanding what's going on beyond just the surface level of its premise, it becomes easier to enjoy this one.
Watch it yourself. It's on Max. It's digitally readily available to watch and purchase or rent. And of course, G Kids re-released it, and it comes with a little booklet. I just wish I knew what the production history for this film was, because a lot of hearsay was all about how Takahata was fairly upset with how My Neighbor Totoro was gaining the success that it was. I mean, it's just interesting because it feels like some people try to put a relationship strain on Miyazaki and Takahata, which I'm sure they had. Every friendship has their moments of this, like, where you can't stand the other person. But for Takahata to be jealous of Miyazaki's success with Totoro and what have you, I just don't really buy that anymore. And who knows, maybe a lot of that came from mistranslations or misunderstandings in interviews and such. Because if I recall, Takahata was one of the people who actually got Miyazaki to make Studio Ghibli because they were all tired of working in the straining and about to burn down anime industry. So who knows? I would love to hear a interview or like find out what went into making this movie.
If there's anything out there that's a more accurate timeline of this movie's production, I would definitely love to read that.
Go check it out. It's still a really good movie, all things considered. But now we must journey into the future to 2023 as we talk about a quite lovely stop motion indie animated film called The Inventor. An interesting note to talk about with The Inventor. This was a crowdfunded, and what I mean by that is this film was originally on Kickstarter and was asking for funding to make a feature film about a different take on Leonardo da Vinci that was directed, written, and produced by Jim Capobianco, who worked on Ratatouille in the story department. I should know, and I'm saying all this because I was one of the backers for this film. You won't see my name in the credits because they did that whole, you gotta throw in $100 for the actual honor, quote unquote, to be in the credits as a backer, which I really hate that practice. Just on a side tangent, if someone backs your film or short film or whatever, put their names in the credits, man. Don't make it a tier that it's like, hey, if you pay more money, you'll see your name in this product.
And $100 for that is only a tiny bit unreasonable. It's very unreasonable.
Well, it's like you would get other things about it, like other perks with that on top of that, but it's definitely like, yeah, that's not worth paying additional money for. I just paid enough for a digital copy of the film. This story is about Leonardo da Vinci, who leaves Italy to join the French court where he can experiment freely. Basically, how the story goes is that Leonardo da Vinci is very curious about how the world works. From the biggest of things like the moon and the stars to the microscopic and the philosophical, like the human body and soul. Of course, the Pope, voiced delightfully by Matt Berry, is like, no, make weapons for me because we need to make sure we show that might makes right in this world. If this film does sound familiar as well, if you weren't in the Kickstarter scene, it did play at the Annecy Film Festival this year. In general, before we dive into it, I found this film delightful. It's like a lost Rankin Bass special, but without all the clunkiness of a Rankin Bass production.
Yeah. As soon as I saw the character design for Leonardo da Vinci, I'm like, oh, that definitely looks like something from like that classic Rankin Bass era. That and the Pope definitely looks like an ancestor of the Burgermeister Meisterburger.
Like, they recently released like an 18 film collection for Rankin Bass stuff, and I'm probably going to get that for Christmas and such.
Is in 4K?
Not 4K, but Blu-ray, so HD nonetheless.
Still.
And some of them have not been in HD before, but I digress. The very cool thing about The Inventor is, while it has a more childlike look and visual presentation, which I think is why they went with the old school stop motion look instead of trying to copy what Aardman or Leica or other studios are doing, it still talks about some fairly complex things that may fly over most kids. So I take a little ire of like when people say this is a kids movie, and it's like it's a kids movie in terms of visual presentation, but even then it has some amazing 2D sequences on
Mm-hmm.
top of the great stop motion. There's a lot of time talking about how life and the human soul work. And I don't know how most kids are going to react to that, even though I think kids can handle heavier topics.
They can, and that's why you will never catch me saying, oh, it's a kids' movie as either a dismissive statement or an excuse for writers to slack off, for lack of a better term.
Even when a film is made for like a certain audience, like Paw Patrol, not made for us. All you can do with a film like that is make it the best that it can be with the time you are given for that audience.
Exactly.
Because we're entering this kind of area of like, and I'm probably guilty of saying this also, that there's no excuse or what have you with how good these films can be, but like the other studios aren't going to do them. And it's just like, not every solution and production pipeline is going to fit every film, and not every film can afford to do something on the same level as other studios.
Not only that, but I don't necessarily want every movie like to do things the exact same way. Like something that I love about this movie is that it feels so handmade. It's an actual labor of love.
The thing about production, and it's going to vary wildly depending on the industry that they are in, whether it's gaming, TV, or film. Some people can be like, oh, well, they just did that, so we'll do that. And then they can find themselves out of a job. Like a studio can shut down and such. So a lot of that happens, and I wish more people understood that. But back to the Inventor itself. Definitely a very straightforward movie because Da Vinci just wants to create. He just wants to explore the human body and spirit, figuratively, literally, and through other means. And I'm sure this is not the most historically accurate telling of Da Vinci's life.
Probably not.
But I do like the detail that they keep on with Da Vinci's quote-unquote war weapons. Da Vinci did, in fact, leave a weakness in everything that he made to make them essentially unusable. And you see that through the montage at the beginning when Da Vinci is showing off the weapons of war to the Pope, and how most of whatever weapons he could make could easily be overturned or used against them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a nice little touch because that's one of the best parts about Da Vinci's creations is that the war weapons were like, yeah, they look cool, but they're entirely useless unless you literally go in there and retool essentially the whole thing.
I gather like that's kind of his approach to, I guess, an anti-war mindset where, he's got fail safes in these designs because he doesn't actually want people to use his ideas for war. He just wants to create and explore.
A lot of his time is just finding means of like elevating, increasing the humankind, and just instead of going by rigid whatever the royalty in charge wants, he wants to make humanity better in this movie. That's his main goal. And it's handled pretty well. Like, it takes a lot of notes from how some studios, like the aforementioned Ghibli, handle the fact that while there are some bad people, some are just misguided. Like, not to say that no one can be excused here. There's definitely that spectrum of the Pope was not thinking in good faith. But the guy in France, King Francis, was misguided because he wanted to make sure England and Spain would cower in their boots at the might of what France could do to overturn both countries. But he realizes at the end that what he was thinking was not what was going to be the best for his kingdom and such. By the way, maybe I should have expected this because it's Jim Capobianco who, again, helped with the story for Ratatouille. This was a very funny movie in a multitude of various ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you had dialogue jokes, you had visual gags, and I love when the kings of Spain and France come, and they're like, don't worry, we're going to set up shop nearby. And they get into what it was essentially a dick measuring contest with their castles.
That scene, I'm always a fan of like scenes like that where they go to like just ridiculous extremes to outdo the other. But yeah, that and some of the other visual gags, like in the beginning when Da Vinci and the rest of his entourage are showing the Pope the montage of all the weapons. There's a lot of like classic era sight gags throughout that presentation.
Like we said earlier, the movie has a mix of visual styles, which include 2D, the typical stop motion that you see throughout the film, and it looks great. It's such a charming visual style that doesn't feel like it's trying to directly ape off of the Rankin Bass look. We're at a point in time now where a bunch of shows were like, let's do the Rankin Bass look because that's cool, and then completely miss the point or miss the target of what a Rankin Bass style film looks like.
A lot of those TV specials that sort of ape the style of Rankin Bass, they do it on such a surface level without really fully appreciating what made those things work.
And to be clear, Rankin Bass definitely has some storytelling elements and writing that did not work, but their animation, which were handled by a lot of Japanese animators, has such a distinct visual flair and charm to how all the characters move that you have to really know what you're doing when trying to capture that spirit. Even when they made that Heat Miser and Mr. Snow special, golly, maybe a decade ago or so now, or even longer than that, the people who made that didn't quite get why Rankin Bass. It's a thing of, like we've talked about, a superficial layer of like, oh, this is what it looks like. And then try to modernize it. And it's just like, no, that's why it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It definitely has moments where it's all about Da Vinci progressing through his studies of what makes the human soul worth it, while also avoiding, was it death, essentially? Like the big shadowy entity in his thoughts?
You could certainly interpret it that way.
Because there was definitely something that lingered over his journey to discover humanity that was unnerving to him. And again, I just gotta say, I love the 2D animation that was used here. A lot of people might gritch and groan at the simplistic designs that are used, but boy howdy, you become an animator, and then you try to make your highly detailed character models and designs move, whether in stop motion or 2D, man. Like, it's a lot harder than it looks, and it's one of those things where I think a lot of animation fans took, and I've said this before, the wrong lessons from people like Richard Williams and such.
Yeah, it's great to have these like highly detailed character designs, but part of animation is movement, and you kind of have to think practically to bring these designs to life.
And the designs are charming. I love these round-headed, lean-figured character designs, and I love that big, burly assistant to Da Vinci. I love his design. I love all the different designs for all of the royalty, like a Francis the First of France, Francesco Melzi, and Henry VIII. Like, they add so much personality to them because they aren't highly detailed and intricate. And the voice cast is also very good. I loved Stephen Fry as Da Vinci.
He's so good and so jovial in his search for the human soul.
His voice is like a warm blanket. It's very cozy. And Matt Berry as a Pope, as we've all said, is amazing. The man-child way that he brings the Pope to life for back then is so fun because Matt Berry has so much energy to him. Though maybe it's because I watched too much What We Do in the Shadows. I was waiting for the Pope to be like, I am actually Jackie Daytona. Like, if you've seen the show, you know the reference. And I also liked seeing Daisy Ridley. I mean, like, she never went anywhere. Good Lord, if you follow film controversy news, you know she was in a film recently that caused yet another stupid debate about Rotten Tomatoes. She was in, like, that film that caused it. And I like her. I like her as Marguerite de Navarre. Like, she brings a headstrong character to Marguerite. Then we also have, like, Marion Cotillard as Louisa Savoy, who has more of a head on her shoulders than any of the men in royalty positions.
Yep.
I loved the whole bit of Francesco and Henry fighting, and then she just, like, tells them to stop it, and they're like, okay, don't hurt us, for the love of God. So we have, like, Natalie Palamides, Jim Capobianco, Ben Stranahan, Gautier Batul, Max Baumgarten, Jane Osborne, John Gilkey, Angelino Sandri, and Daniel Swan. They bring, like, the right kind of energy to this one. Very low-key, nothing super cartoony and extravagant, but they still put in very good performances. They're not just going zany and goofy because this might aim at a smaller audience.
It kind of has a British sense of humor to some extent, and I think there's one joke or one running gag that also just worked for me is the two gravediggers that notice whenever one of the bodies just disappears.
Oh, I love that reoccurring gag where they're just talking and messing around and then they're just like, oh, where did the body go? Now that felt like a Rankin Bass, Henry Selick moment of execution and such. I mean, it does have an arc of Da Vinci hitting a low point of he's either going to die or his takes and perspectives are not being met. Because at first he left to go to France because of the Pope not taking his ideas seriously. And he thinks that Francis I is going to take him more seriously when Francis is really no different. Which,
yeah,
if you needed to know that this film had an anti-war message, it's right there. Like, see how childish and war-hungry the quote-unquote the adults in the room are. It ends on a pretty good and positive note of just, like, Da Vinci being like, I find joy in life when my ideas are shown to other people. And I was curious if they were trying to do a very romantic perspective with Da Vinci and Marguerite, but luckily it's more platonic, I would say.
I wasn't really getting any romantic vibes from them either.
It was more like she was the one who saw the greatness in what Da Vinci wanted to do for the city, for mankind, and what have you, which there's also like a running theme of censoring of art and of information, because the Pope and Francis I were ready to just tear up, burn, destroy the blueprints that Da Vinci crafted, which, considering what we're going through right now with book bannings and book burnings and what have you, it's important to make sure that art is alive and that we don't let these extremists get their way.
Yeah.
Yes, this one was probably not going to win at Annecy, and I don't trust anyone or critics to either watch this movie or to vote for it, because it's going to get lost in the shuffle. And I think that sucks, because it's not its fault that it's coming out in a year where we have a new Miyazaki film. But I find it a very delightful, charming little movie.
I agree. I don't even really have any major negatives other than the fact that, kind of like Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, there are some musical numbers in this, but it doesn't really commit necessarily to being a musical. The music itself is lovely. I have no idea if this was trying to be a musical and the songs just weren't really clicking, but I think Alex Mandel's score is just so well done that it honestly didn't even really matter.
I honestly forgot that there were musicals in this movie. I totally forgot about about that, which kind of tells you one thing. But otherwise, yeah, I agree with that. And I understand why some people, it doesn't reinvent the wheel. And it's just like, once again, we are at a moment in time where we could lose, like, movies that are just super well executed and know what they're doing could get lost or overshadowed because people want to see, like, individuals and filmmakers push the envelope. But not every filmmaker's like that. And being a cozy, comfortable movie like The Inventor that has a lot of charm and creative sequences, like, is okay. like yes, I am also very vocal of, I want to see people reinvent the wheel, but I'm also heavily okay to have a well executed experience.
Even like to that, just jumping off what you said about that, I would even argue that the animation in this movie and like how they combine the 2D and 3D, again, it's not necessarily reinventing the wheel or anything, but it is commendable to see more filmmakers playing around with mixed media, something that I will always champion.
Well, we have, like, what helps is that this film has people like Fang Wei as the film's 2D animation director, and the 2D animation consultant is Tom Moore of Cartoon Saloons. These people knew what they were doing.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, I think by the time this podcast episode comes out and when I can finally get my review out, the film probably won't be in theaters. So you'll have to make sure to look if it's playing anywhere near you. Otherwise, you might have to wait until it hits digital, or Blue Fox Entertainment, the US distributors that picked up this film for distribution, find a partner in giving this film a physical release. Which, I mean, like, I get it. Some of these smaller distributors can't be like G Kids or Shout Factory, where they can't get a physical release for their movies. But it would be a real shame for films like Little Nicholas and The Inventor to be stuck on digital-only storefronts.
Yeah. If there's any film that warrants a physical release, it's definitely this one.
Exactly. I highly recommend watching this one and seeing what y'all think about it. But for now, we are done with this episode. Next time, we will definitely be talking about Tales from Earthsea and maybe something else. Maybe My Father the Bounty Hunter. We're hitting another dry spot, per se, with animation. I'm going to be gone for about 3 weeks because I'll be busy with stuff outside of this podcast and then going to animation as film. So we'll make sure to keep you all up to date. But probably the next time you'll hear from us is when we do a possible Halloween themed episode. So
I've got a couple ideas brewing, but until next time, Cameron, where can everyone find you online?
you can find me on Twitter, as long as that hell site is still standing, and Blue Sky at Cam's Eye View. I have my own website called camseyeview.biz, where I review animated films and shows from around the world called The Other Side of Animation. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/camseyeview. That's where you can find me.
And you guys can find me on various social media at Captain K42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterboxd.com/Coach K42. And you can follow Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and the site formerly known as Twitter at Ren Pop Culture. You can also find us on YouTube, on Podchaser, subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/Renegade Pop Culture. Listen to all of our podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. Need an escape? So do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Animation. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.